Let's get right into it. Number 10. Goldsboro nuclear accident. In 1961, a B-52 bomber carrying 2 nuclear bombs started falling apart mid-flight over North Carolina. Not ideal when you're carrying enough nuclear power to wipe out the entire East Coast. Each bomb was 250 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. It was basically like having 2 mini suns falling from the sky. One bomb hit the ground at 700 miles per hour, burying itself deep in a muddy field. The other one floated down on its parachute. These bombs had 6 safety switches to prevent them from going off by accident. On the bomb that landed softly, 5 of those 6 switches failed. One tiny switch, probably worth about 20 cents, was all that stood between the East Coast and becoming a giant glowing parking lot. The military spent days digging up the buried bomb. They only found parts of it. Some pieces are still 180 feet underground today. The military bought the land and put up a sign saying, "Do not dig here." A local farmer now grows soybeans on that field. His crops are probably the most heavily guarded soybeans in America. A nuclear weapons expert later revealed we came closer to nuking North Carolina than we ever did during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Number 9. The Vasa. Imagine spending 2 years building the most expensive ship ever made, only to watch it sink after sailing just 1,300 meters. The Vasa was Sweden's attempt at building the world's most powerful warship. The ship was basically a floating palace, covered in fancy wooden carvings and packed with 64 bronze cannons. The king wanted it to look so intimidating that enemy ships would surrender just by looking at it. But there was a tiny problem. It was too tall and skinny. Basically, they put a mansion on top of a canoe and hoped it would float. The ship was so unstable that during testing, 30 sailors running back and forth across the deck almost capsized it. But instead of fixing the problem, they just told the sailors to stop running. On launch day, they threw a massive party. Thousands lined the harbor, including the crew's families. The gun ports were wide open to show off those shiny cannons. Then a light breeze hit the ship. Not a storm, not huge waves, just a gentle breeze that barely moves your hair. The ship tilted to one side. Water started pouring in through those open gun ports. It was like forgetting to close your car windows during a car wash. The Vasa sank right there in the harbor, in front of everyone. 2 years of building turned into a really expensive fish hotel in about 20 minutes. Number 8. Mars Climate Orbiter failure. NASA spent $327 million on a spacecraft, only to watch it vanish because someone forgot to convert inches to centimeters. The spacecraft was supposed to study Mars's weather, like a space weatherman, but instead of orbiting Mars, it ended up doing a very expensive impression of a shooting star. One team was using pounds for their calculations, while another team was using metric units. When it was time for the orbiter to enter Mars orbit, these mismatched numbers meant it flew way too close to the planet. At spacecraft speeds, Mars's thin atmosphere might as well be a brick wall. The orbiter, which wasn't built to handle that kind of pressure, basically disintegrated. Nobody caught this mistake during the entire 9-month journey to Mars. It's like driving across the country only to realize at the very end that you've been reading the map upside down. Number 7. The Wicked Bible. In 1631, 2 printers made a mistake so severe the king wanted them dead. They had one job: print copies of the Bible. But they managed to drop one tiny word that changed everything. The word not. So instead of, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," their version read, "Thou shalt commit adultery." King Charles I was furious about his subjects being commanded to cheat on their spouses. He ordered every copy of what became known as the Wicked Bible to be hunted down and burned. The printers got dragged to court, hit with a massive fine, and lost their printing license. Another version from that era accidentally printed, "Printers have persecuted me," instead of "Princes have persecuted me." Given what happened to these guys, this mistake turned out to be accidentally prophetic. Some people kept their copies instead of burning them. Today, only about 10 copies survive. Each one is worth over $100,000, making it one of the most valuable typos in history. Number 6. The Great Boston Molasses Flood. A massive tank filled with 2.3 million gallons of molasses sat in Boston's North End. This thing was as tall as a 5-story building. The tank had been leaking for months. Kids would even collect the dripping molasses in buckets for free candy. The company just painted the tank brown to hide the leaks. Then on January 15, 1919, the tank's walls finally gave up. A wave of molasses, moving at 35 miles per hour, crashed through the streets. The wave knocked buildings right off their foundations. It picked up and moved an entire firehouse. An elevated train track got ripped apart like it was made of paper. When people fell into this stuff, they couldn't swim. The more they struggled, the deeper they sank. basically like drowning in slow motion. The cleanup was a nightmare. Rescuers got stuck trying to rescue people who were stuck. Everything stayed sticky for months until they discovered salt water could break down the molasses. Some victims were found basically mummified in molasses. The company tried to blame anarchist bombers, but they had just built the tank too thin and cheap. They didn't even have an engineer check the design. They just told some guys to slap it together and hope for the best. Even today, locals say that on hot summer days, you can still smell molasses in that part of Boston. Number 5. Tacoma Narrows Bridge Collapse. In 1940, Washington State had a bridge that danced in the wind. They called it Galloping Gertie because it would sway and bounce like a giant jump rope. The engineers were so focused on making it look cool, they basically built a giant wind instrument. They made it super thin and light, thinking they were being clever. When wind hit this bridge, it started doing something called aeroelastic flutter. Imagine holding a piece of paper by its edge and blowing on it. See how it waves up and down? Now imagine that. But it's a massive bridge with cars on it. On November 7th, the wind picked up and the bridge started its final dance. The whole structure was twisting like a wet towel being wrung out. A man got stuck on the bridge when his car stalled. He had to crawl on his hands and knees to escape. His dog refused to move and became the bridge's only victim. Number 4. The Subpar rivets on the Titanic. The Titanic wasn't just brought down by an iceberg. It was also betrayed by millions of tiny metal pins. These rivets, about the size of your thumb, were literally the only things holding the unsinkable ship together. The Titanic used over 3 million rivets, but instead of using top-quality iron, they went with the dollar store version. When the ship hit the iceberg, these rivets had one job: keep the steel plates together. Instead, they popped out like buttons on pants after Thanksgiving dinner. Once a few rivets failed, it created a domino effect. Imagine pulling one loose thread on a sweater and watching the whole thing unravel. That's what happened to the Titanic, with freezing water rushing in through every gap. The company was so focused on making everything fancy. Gold-plated this, mahogany that. Meanwhile, the actual things holding the ship together were cheaper than the dinner plates. Number 3. The Great London Beer Flood. In 1814, a 15-foot wave of beer crashed through London streets. The Horseshoe Brewery had a massive wooden tank, 22 feet tall, holding enough beer to fill 3,500 barrels. One of the iron hoops holding this monster together snapped. Just a tiny crack, like when your belt buckle breaks. The workers ignored it. That was their first and last mistake. Within an hour, the whole tank exploded, knocking over other tanks with it. 320,000 gallons of hot, fermenting beer burst out like a tidal wave. The wave of beer hit the poor neighborhood of St. Giles like a tsunami. Tables, chairs, and beds got tossed around like toys in a bathtub. People living in basement homes didn't stand a chance. A mother and daughter were having tea when the beer wave hit their house. They didn't even have time to stand up. In another building, people were having an Irish wake. The beer flood crashed their funeral and turned it into their own. While some people were drowning in beer, others saw it as a free drink. People ran out with pots and buckets to scoop up the beer. Others just opened their mouths and hoped for the best. 8 people died that day, not from drinking the beer, but from drowning in it. The brewery called it an act of God to avoid paying damages. Number 2. The $2 billion Tokyo Stock Exchange typo. In 2005, someone at a Japanese bank made probably the most expensive typo in history. They were supposed to sell one share of a company for 610,000 yen. Instead, they accidentally typed in an order to sell 610,000 shares for 1 yen each. That's like trying to sell your car for $20,000, but accidentally listing 20,000 cars for $1 each. The company only had 14,500 shares total. So this person tried to sell 41 times more shares than actually existed. The bank desperately tried to cancel the order, but the exchange's computer system just kept saying no. Other traders saw what was happening and jumped on it like sharks smelling blood. They started buying up these dirt-cheap shares like they were toilet paper during a pandemic. The mistake sent the entire Japanese stock market into panic mode. By the time they finally sorted everything out, the bank had lost about $225 million. Number 1. Mariner 1 failure. NASA lost a $135 million spacecraft because someone forgot to draw a line over a letter. Not because of aliens, not because of space debris, but because of missing punctuation. The year was 1962, and NASA was trying to send their first probe to Venus. Everything looked perfect on launch day. The rocket lifted off beautifully. Then it started doing something that looked less like space travel and more like drunk driving. The guidance system had a tiny error in its code. Someone forgot to put a line over a letter in the math equation. The rocket started zigzagging through the sky like a toddler after too much sugar. The computer was sending correction after correction, each one making things worse. Ground Control watched in horror as their multi-million-dollar spacecraft decided to try interpretive dance. They had to blow it up before it could crash into the Atlantic Ocean shipping lanes. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.